Welcome back to the For Love of the Game podcast. Today we are joined by the founder and one of the authors for the Drummey Angle, Dylan Drummey. Dylan,
Nice to
welcome
meet
to
you.
the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be on here.
So, we will get into the stats and take a deep dive shortly here, but for the baseball romantic, I always love to start the episodes, where does your For Love of the Game come from? Who introduced you to baseball? Where does it all start for you?
Oh, yeah. So for me personally, both sides of my family have always been baseball families. They all play baseball. And so just being around that, getting taken to a lot of games as a kid and playing personally, it got me kind of being into it. I think I want to say my grandpa on my mom's side was the first person to really get me into it and taught me how to play and just showed me the teams and whatnot. And it was something that, like, I don't know. I mean, it was definitely love at first sight. I've been obsessed since I was little, and I'm still obsessed, as kind of will become obvious in this podcast. But it's they really kind of started the whole thing off for me.
Yeah. Very cool. And so, who were some of your favorite players growing up? Who's your team?
Okay, so I'm from Northern Kentucky, so it's a little bit. So I'm about like 30 minutes from Great American Ballpark for Cincinnati. And so I always grew up around the Reds. Reds, I mean, we Cincinnati is a very deeply ingrained baseball town. It's where baseball started in 1869. Um, First baseball team ever. So it's for me. I mean, as far as my favorite players goes, I was always a big Votto. Votto has been like kind of, like you can't you can't not like be a Red fan and not like Joey Votto. It just doesn't like he's served as such like a gleam of hope in a relatively dark past decade. And so it's been really nice to just see his accomplishments and how he's going for the Hall of Fame. I like a bunch of the past Reds too. Barry Larkin's one of them. I'm a big fan of. I mean, you have Joe Morgan before he passed. He was good. Johnny Bench. I mean, a lot of those guys that are kind of still around here a little bit. And yeah, as far as Reds that goes, and my second probably though all time, I love David Ortiz. He was one of the first guys I saw on TV, and when he made the Hall of Fame, I was so happy. I'm like, first ballot. It's just I love Big Poppy. He's
Yeah,
just such a great player.
he has such a larger than life personality too, and so you don't get offended when I say this, but I grew up a Yankees fan, so
Yeah.
I absolutely hated Pedro, Manny, Big Poppy, naturally, but as I've grown older and been around the game a little bit, my love for the game has taken on a kind of a, I guess, new approach where I can kind of step back from that rivalry at least and appreciate true greatness. And, to talk about Cincinnati, it is one of the greatest, you said one of the richest sports franchises in baseball. And, it's kind of a shame to see what it's become. I know there's the ownership has taken some heat from the fans and rightfully so. They traded away, a lot of the up and coming guys, a lot of the major prospects. But one guy who I just read a book about, Tony Perez, the big dog, and it was very cool to learn about his story and how the big red machine came together. So definitely a very cool baseball city, and I wish they would bring the first game, the opening day, back. It just doesn't feel
Yes.
opening day doesn't
Yes.
feel
Yes.
without it. I'm sure you guys feel the same way.
Very
Um,
much so.
but so what are some of your earliest ballpark memories? Are there any that sticking out in your mind?
As far as that goes, there's not a lot. Like, I'll be honest, like just being at the ballpark more of there's not any specific. I mean, probably the earliest one that I remember vividly is so that one of my grandpas took me on a baseball trip. Like like basically East Coast. We went, I think it was Camden Yards, or we were at Camden Yards, Fenway. New Yankee Stadium. Um, there was a couple others that I'm kind of forgetting off the top of my head. The Nationals, and that was the other one. And so we were at Nationals Park, and it was I forget. To be honest, I truly do forget who they were playing. It may have been the Reds. It was the Reds because that's why we started that trip there. And so when we saw the Reds, they went and like it was a really fun game. And what happened was so it was fouled. There was a ball that was like fouled off, like deep in the stands. And this dude caught it. And I'm like, at the time I was like 8 or 9 years old. And I'm like, dying for a baseball. And the dude threw it to me. Like it was Max Scherzer was pitching that night. And it was just like one of the coolest moments that I'll remember forever. I'm like, I still have that ball, the one Max Scherzer threw. So it's like, that's probably one of my like brightest, earliest moments that I can think of.
Yeah, it's almost magical, especially that first time you get the baseball, and like you said, when you have future Hall of Famer Max Scherzer pitching, and you're against your favorite team, like that's pretty special. So that's pretty cool, and to do a whole East Coast swing, I would love to do that. I've been to the parks that you mentioned, on separate occasions, but to take like a week or 2 weeks to kind of do that whole East Coast swing, or even I would love to go to the Midwest, and because I haven't been to Wrigley, to Chicago. Would love to see those two parks. Would love to go to St. Louis and Kansas City, but very, very cool. Very cool. So talk about the Drummey Angle. What is it for those who don't know, and why did you start it?
So the Drumming Angle. So we basically started. Our official start date was like early 2021, but the idea still came. It came into like me thinking and plotting it out in late 2020. It was still COVID era. We were still all locked in, and so basically what happened was when I was like going online and trying to look for stuff, I didn't feel that there were enough resources that explained a lot of the advanced stats that I cared about in like an easy to understand way. Like it was a trying process having to learn sabermetrics. And there are a lot of resources out there, but truthfully, a lot of them are very difficult to understand. And it takes a lot of time. And like when you don't have something that more easily translates that stuff. So I kind of, when I started the point of my site, I wanted to be able to give people analysis, give people thoughts on things in a way that was a lot more understandable to regular people compared to the writing that a lot of these super advanced stats writers do.
Yeah, and that's a great point too. A lot of the stuff, I myself haven't even dived into because a lot of it is over my head. I'm still, trying to grasp the concept of WAR and how that's calculated. And to give you, I guess, my point of view in college, I actually did a thesis for one of my management classes. I think it was statistics or something to do with it. The title was WAR. What is it good for? So that kind of gives you my perspective of things, and I always compare it to, not really understanding the vast majority of these new stats, but I always compare it to the movie Little Big League. The announcer, he's always rambling off those stats like so and so is a 270 hitter in day games above the Mason-Dixon line, and it's so that's kind of my relationship with sabermetrics, at least. So would love to dive in a little deeper and talk about, at least in your opinion, what are some of the stats that might be a little bit easier for the conventional fan like myself to try to understand, and what should they understand, because this is a new era of baseball. So would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, absolutely. There's definitely a lot, but I'll definitely give a brief down version because I could go on about this stuff for a long time. But I think the first important thing like that I got to like that when I think about learning about sabermetrics is you need to figure out the conventional things that aren't as valuable as you think. I mean, off the top of my head, batting average, RBIs, stuff like that. And I've written about a couple of that stuff, or some of that stuff, but a lot of those metrics that people look at and they're like, "Oh wow, this matters." I mean, I'll take batting average for example. A guy can be like, I think Juan Soto would be a good example. I think he's hitting sub 250 right now, right? And like people look at that and they're like, "Oh, he must be doing horrendous." And he's not off to a like Juan Soto-ish start, but when you look at like say a more advanced more advanced stat like WOBA, which is weighted on base average, and is technically the more accurate version of both on base percentage and slugging, and a more based on just, runs produced from certain events. So when you look at stuff like that, and then you see, oh, wow, this guy is actually above major league average by a major portion, yet he's hitting below 250, it's something that people definitely need to consider when evaluating a player and not just taking those surface level metrics and kind of diving in deeper if they really want to say an opinion about a player.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a good point. And, that's the one where I look at it just easy. You got your average, your home runs, and your RBIs, just your traditional stat line, on a regular broadcast, on a regular game. And for me, though, I feel like there has to be some weight to batting average because you look at guys like Hicks and Gallo right now in the Yankees who are, absolutely horrendous, at least in my opinion, having a terrible year, especially looking at the average. I know they walk a lot, but I feel like you have to find a mix, between the conventional and some of the sabermetrics.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other stats that you think are just obsolete that we, shouldn't pay and, should hold probably zero weight at all?
I mean, there's a ton. I mean, if I really were to pressure on one, I don't think RBIs should be ever considered in anything. I try to stay away from extreme views just in general, even regarding baseball. And I think RBIs is one that I feel very passionately about because you look at all the research and you look at all the better metrics that are out there. RBIs literally they tell you how much opportunity a player has. And in my personal opinion, the opportunity a player has does not correlate to how good he actually is. And so I think people saying, "Oh wow, this player had over 100 RBIs for a season," that somebody can tell me that and I will legitimately not know how good they are. Like they can tell me like when you think about that and then people because most people will automatically correlate more RBIs to better. And that's just not actually how it works in helping a team. So I think like RBIs, I definitely want to hammer. I'd highly recommend people to look into the validation behind that. And I've written on that personally. I remember I wrote an article, should baseball keep valuing the RBI? And I was very adamantly against it and suggested a couple alternatives.
Okay, that's interesting because I mean, again, that's one I really like, and for me, that I guess I look at it that shows how clutch a player is, at least from my point of view. Um, it was funny because I don't know if you're familiar with the Towing the Slab podcast with David Cohn. They were having a little statistics conversation, and one of his favorites is innings pitched, and I thought that was interesting because, from my perspective, I kind of love that because it shows you who the real workhorses are. And I know the past couple of years has seen a total shift on the way we view starting pitching. But for me, if I'm managing, I want those guys who are going 6, 7, 8, sometimes not complete games so we're saving the bullpen down the stretch in the dog days of summer. What do you think about that?
So it was David Cohn who said
Yep.
that? Oh yeah, I mean, to be honest, that's incredibly intelligent and just in my personal opinion, just because so that's the thing about sabermetrics too. They don't need to be complicated to be informative. You don't need complicated numbers to know how good a player is. Innings pitched are perfect at telling what you need to know. So me and my author, one of my authors, his name is Clark. He's a great dude, but we had an argument last year over the NL Cy Young. Right? It was Zach Wheeler and Corbin Burns, and so I was a Burnsist, and he was Wheelerite, and so basically, and we argued about it over a lot, and so Burns. Ultimately, I was a Burnsist because even when he did pitch, he was so incredible. I felt like he was 2 steps above Wheeler when he did pitch, even though I want to say he had about 40-ish less innings, 30 to 40-ish. It was something like high 160s to 210s ish for comparison. And I think innings, when you look at that, if it wasn't for that margin, if say Burns or something, like if say Wheeler was more Burns-esque, like even if there was like a 20 inning difference, I would have probably chosen Wheeler, because you got to consider even if he's not as good, when you're on the field for longer, you're producing more value, you're helping more team, and you're being frankly, starting pitchers are more than likely going to be better than any reliever other than possibly a star closer like Josh Hader, a specialist. So unless you have a guy like that, the longer a starter can stay in, the more value you're providing for a team. So I've kind of come around on that a little bit, because while I was a Burns's, I've over the past year or so, I've really turned around my thinking on how much I value innings and how important it is to consider just from a value aspect.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the value aspect, because I want to dive into that a little bit. And these teams are evaluating; they have their own systems on how they analyze and come to a conclusion on what a player is worth. But I looked up the top 5 position players and the top 5 pitchers based on their annual salaries, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll just rattle them off to you. So for position players, and this is based on not contract length, total contract, but per year what they're getting paid. So Corey Seager's number 1, number 2 is Anthony Rendon, number 3 is Mike Trout, 4 is Carlos Correa, and 5 is Miguel Cabrera. For pitchers, number 1 is Max Scherzer, 2 is Garrett Cole. This was written in March, so 3 was Trevor Bauer, 4 is Zach Wheeler, who you mentioned, 5 is Justin Verlander, and 6, I want to put 6 in here because this kind of blew me away, because I don't think this guy is ace material at all, but Marcus Stroman.
Yeah.
And looking at his track record, I don't think was deserving of, what he got. But the team thought otherwise. But based on your value metrics, who do you think should be in the top 5 for pitchers and position players? Are some of those guys still in there?
You have the occasion, but for the most part, the list is somewhat turned around as far as that goes. A lot of those guys, Garrett Cole comes to mind as one that, while I don't agree with the entire length of the contract, temporarily that AAV is going to be settled and he's going to produce excess value. And so that's why when teams sign these long-term value contracts, most of the time, temporarily, the teams are actually getting a deal. So to put it in perspective, I like to use, so the number one value statistic that you generally use is WAR. And so Fangraphs has this value thing to where they take what the free agent market or what the cost of one free agent WAR is, and they kind of calculate that and put that into a statistic every year. And so when you look at that, a lot of those guys, when they're signed, is that the teams will be winning at first. When they start to lose is those latter years. You like Miguel Cabrera, right? He's a perfect example. Great player when he signed a really good contract. And then now I want to say he was below a replacement level player last year. He produced negative value for his team, and they could have had a AAA player replace him. So it's a lot of those guys, they're getting a good deal now. The teams are, but I mean, as far as my top five, I mean, I had a couple that I wrote down a little bit. I Mookie Betts was definitely one guy that I think it would be remiss to say that he doesn't deserve top five money right now. He's one of the best players in the game. All of his advanced sabermetrics show that this is sustainable. This is what he does. He adds defensive value, which is something you can't say for a lot of these guys. Um, that's one that I really liked. Jose Ramirez, jeez, he was a steal, man. Like I get he wanted to stay in Cleveland, but gosh, it's. I mean, I'm just saying he's gonna bring so much value to that team that Cleveland got him at such a bargain. It's to be envious of. Um, so in top five right now is what we're talking about. I mean, Trout got paid a lot. I don't know if that was included or not. But
Yeah, he's number 3 for the position
yeah,
player.
yeah, Trout makes sense.
Yeah.
That's one guy that I'm like, okay, you pay that man, and he's still gonna probably produce excess value when he's getting paid in the top 2%, the top 1% of the league, basically. So you get a lot of guys like those. Trey Turner, I don't think enough people talk about. I'm a Trey Turner like a fanboy as far as I just think people sleep on him a lot. The man is a value machine. He's good on the bases, right? He's an amazing hitter. He has plus defense. He's an above average fielder, not by a lot, but he is an above average fielder, and that counts for something nowadays. So I think Tree Turner is one of them that he really has just, and especially on a stacked Dodgers, even with the stacked Dodgers team, his just ability to both get on base and be able to even slug for power. For how much of a speed guy he is a decent amount of power. I mean, you're looking at 20 plus home runs this season. So I'm like, those types of guys I really love. As far as going deeper into pitchers, I know I touched on Garrett Cole a bit, but Zach Wheeler, I mean, I know he was on that list. Worth it. Definitely worth it. I didn't think he'd be worth it at the time. That was one man who, truthfully, he changed up his approach. He got a lot better, and it showed. I mean, and he produced more value than I ever could have predicted. And you get a lot of guys like that. Scherzer, even with his age, it kind of makes sense. I don't know if I would have paid him that much, honestly. Mine would have been closer to about the 35-ish range instead of 40s like that. But that was one guy. Jacob Degrom is on a pretty big contract too. He should be, when he's healthy, he is top five. It's even when he's not, even with all of his injury time, when he is healthy, his value is just miles ahead of everybody. It's just absolutely absurd.
Yeah, and that kind of surprised me because he has, I don't know, what is he, 30 now?
Around there, I think he's
Right.
Yeah, around there.
Young 30s, but he has been injured quite frequently, and you look at all these teams, and you spoke earlier about the long-term deals. The one that pops into my head is Albert Pujols with the Angels. He wasn't even a fraction of the player he was when he was on the Cardinals, and they said, what was it? That was the first mega contract that I really remember, and be like, wow, his production totally tanked when he went there. So, and I have to bring this up because I am a Yankees fan. When you look at Aaron Judge, the Yankees didn't offer him that long-term, high-end deal that he was looking for. But, from the Yankees perspective, I almost can't blame them because the guy is 30 years old. And when you take a look at these longer contracts, there's a lot of weight in, a lot of earlier examples of guys not living up to, those $1 million, the 6th, 7th, 8th year in the contract. So I'm just interested to see what happens there.
Yeah, Aaron Judge, that's a great case study. I mean, and I've thought a lot about the Judge contract because that's been a very, very big thing. So one thing that when I was thinking about that is I don't personally advocate for the Yankees signing a long-term contract with him whatsoever. I think it would be a horrible move, and he is highly injury prone. I think people really do forget how often Aaron Judge gets injured. With his build, him being taller, it's a lot easier to. A lot of those guys, they just tend to get injured more. That's how it goes. So I mean, what I do personally when I really think about it, I mean, I'd probably give like personally, I'd come close to paying him 40 million a year if he took 4 or 5 years. Is what I do. I'd pay. I think I'd pay. I'd if he'd take 5 years, I'd give him 200 million. I would pay him up front, but if I mean after that though, I mean I would want to take off. I would either A want to dramatically reduce his contract afterwards, which I don't think he'd agree with, but I'd want to do basically like a de-escalating AAV to where okay, you want a 6-year deal, 35 million, 7-year, 30 million, 8-year, and then it'd probably go like 27 and a half and whatnot. So, and then just kind of 9-year, it go down to, I mean, I would 25 because that's my point. When you're signing those long-term deals, especially with a player like that, who's his age, you got to be careful.
Yeah.
And while, I mean, so I just, if you're paying for somebody at their peak, you're buying the high and you're hoping it keeps going up. It's like I don't know. It's like all those Wall Street bets investors. What comes to mind with all those? You're buying at the high, right? Just to
To the
hope
moon,
that,
right?
that it just keeps going up, and it's realistically not going to. When you see a real unrealistic high, which is him not getting injured this long, it's going to come to a head. I mean, that's how I feel about Shohei Ohtani last year. I was highly surprised he didn't get injured, and I'm a heavy advocate for him getting out of pitching and focusing on hitting. Because while I can appreciate the excess value that he's producing in pitching, or I mean, honestly, moving back to 10 or 15, like every 10th day or something like that, to where he'd be pitching a lot less because the injury risk long term of having him pitch will not make up. Like if he really hurts his arm, which he can, pitchers can. Pitchers can be out for a whole year. Then they lose an entire year of his offensive performance. And that's really valuable. You got to consider, even though the Angels suck, they have two of the best offensive players in the game. And top 10, I would argue. But and Shohei Ohtani's one of them. And you're really risking his bat and he's an above average pitcher, and he's an all-star, but he's not top 10 pitching. I wouldn't call him top 20, honestly. There are a lot of better pitchers than him. He's good. He provides a lot of value, but he's not that good.
Yeah. The last question about the value that I'll ask you, I don't know if you have someone in mind, but who's the most overpaid person in baseball today?
So overpaid is a really hard one, right? Because you don't see a lot of overpaid contracts nowadays. A lot of them are getting bargains. Most of the ones you see are getting bargains. Um, that's a tough one. When I really think about it, I'm trying to scour my brain. A lot of them. I mean, the Pujols contract was genuinely bad. The Angels are still in the hook for that. So I mean, if you were to use technically it's still a current one. So I mean, it may have expired. I'm not sure when the expiration was. If it was at the end of 2021 or whatnot, whatever. It's bottom line. That's the most one in recent history. I think that was one of the worst contracts of the last 10 years. That was just such a horrific signing in such an overpaid slide. And I know that's easy with hindsight, but I mean, it's like the Reds as a Reds fan, right? Reds getting Griffey after he bummed up his knees on AstroTurf in Seattle. So it's like he wasn't what he was. He was starting to break down, and we're still paying him.
Yeah.
We're still paying him about, I
like
think
the third or fourth highest
yeah,
paid guy.
he's like, third or fourth highest, just what you'd expect. So you can't take a guy. It's just I hate long-term contracts. Players should love them. Players should absolutely love the security and try at all costs to get them. But as thinking of from a team side, which is what I often do and how I mostly think of stuff, long-term contracts above 6 years should be your enemy. Unless the guy is like 20, like 22, 23. Do not, I mean, over 6 or 7 might be fine at that point. Like, I'm not a Tatis guy, but Tatis makes sense. Wander Franco, that makes sense. You're hedging your bet. You're taking a very early bet. But a guy who like Harper's contract for how long it was, I mean, you're gonna win up front, but you in the back end, you're gonna kill. It's gonna hurt you bad. And the Phillies can't even win with them anyways.
Well, and they're lucky that the universal DH rule was put in place because he wouldn't be playing right now.
Oh, he would.
Without it.
He can't feel it. It was an arm injury. It was a UCL injury, I want to say, possibly. I think it was a UCL injury that Harper had, so he can't throw.
Yeah.
But you don't see a lot of overpaid guys, but a couple of them slip through, and generally they come through free agency. You're not going to see a lot of overpaid guys that are coming from team extensions. Jordan Alvarez, probably going to be one of the most underpaid players going into these years. Ronald Acuna is pretty hard to beat when you're making $12.5 million and produce, what is it? I want to say, like, if he produces 5 WAR, or I use Fangraphs WAR, he produces like 5 WAR. He's technically worth like 40 million, 40-ish, 35, and he's getting paid 12.5. So guys like him and Ramirez and even Albies, very hard to beat, but I think Jordan Alvarez will be also on that list for underpaid guys.
Yeah, I was checking out your recent article you did on him, and that totally a steal, like you said. But so the one thing about stats, whatever spectrum you wind up on, either conventional or this new era with the sabermetrics, it's just cool because it allows you to compare players across multiple generations, and it really connects the game to the players that my dad watched, or my grandfather, and the greats of the game. And baseball is just very unique in that way too. So we'll move on here to do a couple of rapid fire questions for you. So just pop in the first thing that pops in your head. We'll go with, let's see here, favorite ballpark.
I'm gonna have to go. I mean, Great American's my home. I'm gonna have to go there.
Naturally. What about favorite ballpark food?
I'd have to go. So I'm not a big ballpark food person. I just think it's horrendously overpriced, and that kind of bugs me. I'm that type of guy. But if I had to go to one, Cincinnati chili, like a cheese coney, love those babies. I like they're great, and they're perfect for a ball game.
Yeah, I agree about the prices. They're out of whack. I did go to Atlanta when it was Truist Park or SunTrust, whatever it is now. I was pleasantly surprised with their prices compared to Yankee Stadium and Citi Field.
Yeah,
but
Yankee Stadium is probably horrific.
Yeah, it's insane. But what about favorite baseball tradition?
Favorite baseball tradition. I don't know. I don't think a lot of favorite. I don't have a bunch of favorite ones as far as just all the subtleties that are around. I just really appreciate, just everything about it. It's just a guy's throwing infield. For a Great American, it's a kettle corn all constantly in the air. It's stuff like that just like reminds me of baseball, like this stuff that I'm like I can always count on. So I'm sorry it's not a more specific answer, but I think just as a conglomerate, all the little tiny things is what.
Yeah, it's like the smells, like you said, the Bavarian nuts when you walk into the ballpark, the hot dogs, the sound of the glove, the ball hitting the glove, those things. Yeah, I'm with you on that. What about this? Your favorite stat?
Oh, that's a really tough one. I can't say WAR. I love value. I love evaluation, but I'm not gonna say WAR because technically WAR is this thing called a black box stat, which basically means we don't exactly know how it's calculated. So I want to say WAR, but I'm not because I can't calculate it myself to a degree, even if I wanted to or wanted to learn how to. Um, I don't. I think the newest one, and this is a really advanced one that's come from the future that I'm really starting to like. It's called PCRA, and it was invented like in the past like 4ish years. I think it was Connor Kirkon was his name for a pitchers list, and so it's called Predictive Classified Run Average. And so basically, right, it's like an ERA version that is meant to be predictive of future performance and correlate and regress for certain rates that predict ERA a lot better. And when he ran his statistic through the numbers, it has a much much less rate of error in comparison to even some of the advanced stats. Like if you've heard of FIP, one of them, or even XFIP, all the expected stats, it does better than that when you run it through all those numbers. And I think that's really one that, like, if you're starting to get into advanced stats and want to really find one good advanced one, I love PCRA. It's hard to find. You have to look at a certain Tableau sheet made by a guy named Alex Chamberlain, and it's updated every Friday. So it's not as complicated as like Fangraphs or Baseball Savant, but the information that you're getting is just, it's phenomenal how accurate it is.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't have any idea about that, so I'll have to look that up later.
Absolutely.
What about favorite baseball movie?
Okay, so this is one that I have highly debated like so many times with a lot of my friends and whatnot. So so Moneyball was the reason, kind of. So my end goal with the Drummey Angle and whatnot is that I want to work in baseball for a baseball ops team, and I've been trying to work towards that. And Moneyball is kind of what started my sabermetric fascination. Like a lot of people, I watched the movie. I mean, since I was, born a little later, I watched the movie first and then I read the book. But so when I did that and I realized just all the things I didn't know and that there was a possible way I could understand, that was really meaningful to me, and it's my origin. But I dabble with Field of Dreams, man. Field of Dreams, just a perfect story. Like, I think from a non-sentimental perspective, Field of Dreams is a better movie, but like sentimentally, I like Moneyball better. But like, I think Field of Dreams, like as a film, is just it's like, I know I have my baseball bias, but it's one of my favorite movies. It's like it's top five, like it's a top five movie just in general for me all time.
Yeah.
And Moneyball, it doesn't help because a lot of it was not very true to the actual story. So I love Moneyball and all the personal affiliations with it, but I think I'm gonna have to go Field of Dreams as far as just film in itself.
Yeah, man, it doesn't get better than that. It's like I can't go a baseball season without watching Field of Dreams.
Oh,
And
100%. It's,
you know,
I mean, and the
so
Field of Dreams game, love that. My Reds get to play. My Reds get to play in that. I've been trying to, as a baseball writer, the more I realize you got to try to less designate with a given team, but I'm still with the Reds right now. I still live really close to Cincinnati, but so I take great pride, at least now, for that sake, but in the Reds getting to play in that, and how just literally awesome that game gave me chills. It was so perfect. It couldn't have been done any better. Like, Jenny, actually, the only way it could have been better is if the Reds played the first game, because it would have made more historical sense, right?
right.
Like Reds versus White Sox. Like, that was the whole cause. And don't get me wrong, the Yankees put on a show, but like historical wise, I think that's the only thing that they could have done better. And the Reds were actually good that year too. So it was like, and they bought before, so I'm like, that would have made a good game. But it was still such an amazing game. Tim Anderson's walk off was just like, not probably fun for you, obviously, but
I mean,
it was
yeah,
cool.
but as a baseball fan, that's everything you would have wanted.
Oh, 100%. You won it off in walk-off fashion. And
Like,
I think it was 97, I want to say, something like that. It was like so high scoring. Loved it. Loved it.
yeah, and just everything about it was just
The
pure baseball
jerseys were
stuff.
perfect,
But how about this? We'll end the questions here. We'll do some predictions. We're about a third of the way through the season, so tell me who you have for your AL and NL champs, World Series, MVP, Cy Young, and Rookie of the Year. So all the top awards.
Okay, so rookie of the year, right? Don't get me wrong, Jeremy Pena is in the lead right now as far as WAR and any other advanced stat that you look at, but I'm gonna have to say J Rod. J Rod from the Mariners, I think he'll take it. I genuinely think J Rod will end up taking it. NL is a bit more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty like Seiya Suzuki is somewhat of the consensus favorite. He hasn't been doing great as far as that goes. I mean, it's somewhat unexciting if I'm being honest. The NL race is not something that I'm like excited to talk about, but the AL race, my gosh, there are so many. Adley Rutschman, Bobby Witt. It's just, I mean, everybody is getting a treat right now watching AL rookies.
Yeah, totally.
Oh,
What about yeah, moving on down the list here. MVP, Cy Young.
okay. MVP is a very much tough one. I'm hesitant to make a prediction because I don't think there's a lot of data for what will actually end up happening. Um, I think Mookie Betts is a very good candidate. As far as NL, Mookie Betts would probably be my favorite candidate right now. I don't think Machado will win. I want to clarify that. Um, to be honest, and the AL is fascinating because I'm genuinely unsure of how Judge will continue throughout the season. So I don't know if he will steadily drop off at the All-Star break or what will happen, but I don't this is definitely not sustainable. So let's clarify that beforehand. But I think it's it's gonna be an interesting race. I have Vlad as a dark horse more of.
Okay.
Judge is the favorite. He looks great, but I think he'll fall off. I'd like to see if somebody like Vlad win it. Just personally, I think something like come out of the woodworks. I can see he started off slow, and but I think but NL. But it goes back to it would be Mookie Betts or somehow Juan Soto, just like completely blew me away. I think he's never out of the race ever. Juan Soto will be in the conversation for MVP for the next 6 to 7 years.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that statement. What about all right? What about AL and NL champs and then eventual World Series winner? Who you got?
Do I need to do Cy Young? Did I do Cy Young yet?
Yeah, throw that in there too.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. I was just making sure. I'm like, I thought I didn't do it, but um, AL, or for AL Cy Young, I'm gonna have to go with the favorite, probably the favorite. Yeah, I think Garrett Cole will take it. Yeah, I mean he's been phenomenal.
Not nasty Nestor.
I like it'd be nice, right? Like it'd be kind of cool, but like my author's brought it to me because he's a huge Nasty Nestor fan. So one of his and he's his team's fantasy team's namesake. But I'm like, I look at him and I'm like, he don't get me wrong, he's very deceptive. Hitters don't know how to time him yet, but I feel like it's gonna catch up with him. I don't see a guy like that maintaining the dominance for that while. I think Garrett Cole will end up taking it. I think over a long sample size, Garrett Cole is who takes it, not like 9 times out of 10.
Right.
And NL obviously is much, much more confusing. So at least we don't have to consider 3 with Jacob Degrom. That would have made it very difficult. But we only have Zach Wheeler's in the front running right now. You have Corbin Burns, who that's always. To be honest, it's kind of like somewhat of a rehash of last year, except, at least, to be honest, at least Robbie Ray's not in the race anymore. He shouldn't have won. I don't know why Robbie Ray won the AL last year, but he did. So I think when I'm really thinking about it, it would have to be NL. I lean towards Wheeler because Burns is not as hot as last year. He's really good, but not as good. So I lean towards Wheeler if he can stay healthy. I know he's dealt with some stuff a little bit coming into the year. So I want to lean Wheeler for that one.
Okay.
And okay, so um, World Series is what you want next, or okay? Um, so my A, uh, this is a real tough one. My AL champion, I'll start there. I think the Astros will surprise everyone. I genuinely think people don't know how to value them, and they are consistently swept on, and they are consistently somehow built for the playoffs. As much as somebody believes in a team's ability to thrive, and specifically the playoffs, I think they just have an act. They'll win their division, so that's a given in my personal opinion. So they'll win their division, but I think they'll end up taking the AL over the Yankees in the strong East. Um, I actually don't really even think the Yankees will win the East personally, but
Really
I do not know. I think the Rays will win in the long term. Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. I think the Rays have only gotten better, and I think while the Yankees did play unsustainably bad last year, they are overperforming to an extent. So I think that's my AL thoughts. NL NL's a toughie. I always have the urge to go with the Dodgers, right? Like I always have the urge, but I feel like low key they're just gonna lose in the NL, like NLCS. Like they'll probably lose to somebody who I don't know. I could see like I could see a Cinderella team again for the NL, possibly. I think like gosh, if I had to really pick one, I don't know. I could see somebody like there are 12 spots now, right? I could see somebody like St. Louis making the wild card, like the second wild card spot, and they
They're always there, man.
yeah, they're always there and just unsuspectingly getting on everybody. They've been super hot, and I think they'll cool down a bit, but I think they're a playoff team as far as that. I don't think they win the division, but I think they're a playoff team. So when you consider that, I think that I think some like I would put a Cinderella. Like I'd like to see that. Him, I don't think the Giants will win. But like I think a team like St. Louis makes sense to me at least for what is possible.
So St. Louis Astros World Series, who's winning?
Yeah, hey, that'd be a fun one, man. They've got some history. Got that data stealing scandal back in the day with crap, what was that dude's name? Who went to jail. Crap, what was his name? I'm forgetting it, but it was like notorious. Like it
I
was.
forgot about that. Yeah.
He's at this Chris Correa. That's his name. I want to say it was Correa. I think I want to say it's Chris Correa. I hope I'm not misquoting that. If I am,
I think you're
I
right. I actually
dearly
think he was
apologize.
in. I wrote about him in that article or in
Really? Okay. Yeah. So
in college. Yeah.
Chris Correa, right? So it's that's a tough. I mean to be honest, I'd love to see that. Just as a fan, right? Like I like fan wise, that'd be a beautiful World Series. St. Louis is always fun in the playoffs. I feel like, and the Astros are the Astros, man. I mean, you look at their lineup, and I mean, their pitching's not great, but it's not horrible. It's somewhere in the middle, and they still make the playoffs usually. So I think I think that would be a lot of fun just to see, and I see it as a probable matchup. It'll be very. They go to 7. I would imagine 7 or 6. It will not be. I don't think we'll ever see a 4-1 or 4-0 sweep in something like that. But I think 6 or 7 is realistic. If I had to choose a champion, I've been high on the Astros for a long time. I think they win 4-2 is what I'd say. I'd say Astros 4-2 if I were to really predict it. But I mean, that's me. That's basic speculation. I want to clarify that as somebody who prides himself on sabermetrics and knowing that you need data in a single game playoff series, right? Single game playoff series don't tell you how good an actual team is. They tell
Right.
you it was good for 7 games. And
Right.
so
And
I
you
yeah,
know,
so
teams can make moves at the deadline. They usually do. And just look what
mhm.
happened with the Braves last year.
Yeah.
And yeah,
The
and
Braves got very lucky though. I feel like if that's something we need to talk about, they got really, really lucky. I don't project them that the odds of that were astronomically low, and especially with the players they signed, it wasn't expected. It was like
It was the perfect storm.
it was, yeah, and it helped too because their bullpen was generally not great at all. I mean, you had like a lot of those guys that weren't good, and then you had just Tyler Matzek out of all names, right? Like just Tyler Matzek, like just listen to that dude, and like just absolutely just dogging on everybody, and it was like in the World Series, and I'm just like, what am I watching? What am I watching? What is this, man? Like what if there's a multiverse, right? Like Doctor Strange movie or whatever, like we're in one of those situations to where we're in one out of an infinitesimal amount of odds. So
Yeah.
that was one thing that that generally surprised me. But I think the Cardinals are not like that personally. Like I see them as a team capable. I don't like it's still a Cinderella team, right? From a wild card, but I don't see them as a like the Braves. I generally view as a Cinderella team because I just can't because the East sucked last year. Like there's no way around it. Like I mean, but they barely hit 90 wins. So it's like the East was horrendous. And so when they had somebody actually make the World Series in the first place, it was like, dude, there's no shot. And then but that 7-game series, man, anything can happen. I mean, anything.
Hey, it's
Anything.
baseball, right?
Yeah,
So
anything can happen, That's why you need 162 games to
that's
actually tell
right.
how good the team
That's
is.
right. That's why baseball is the best, man. Well, Dylan,
Yeah.
it's been an absolute pleasure. Just tell folks again how they can find you and your work.
Absolutely. So we are over me and my team. So I'm the founder of the Drummey Angle, but me and my team are over at the drummyangle.com, and that's at the thing below, DRUMMEY. Um but so you can find us there. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter. We don't post on Twitter as much. We're trying to get it up, but Instagram is where Instagram and our website where we're most active. We post 1 to 2 times every week as far as website, and then Instagram, we try to post 3 times a week. And we get some really good content on there that isn't exactly on our website. And we don't feel like it's worth a whole article, but it's really fascinating. And I think you can learn a lot from just checking that out, in my opinion, just from some of the advanced stats. But yeah, it's where you can find me and my team. But this was a pleasure and an amazing conversation.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to have you back on. But there you have it, folks. Go give them a follow. Keep up with what they're doing. They're doing great work. And Dylan, we'll catch you next time.
Absolutely. See you guys.